there was some leaked images, specifically leaked from a factory, from a factory worker in China. This I believe it was China. It might have been Taiwan. I can't remember. Of the shells for the Switch 2 Joy-Cons, as well as the back plate of the new system. Based on that, people have come up with 3D rendered mock-ups of what this thing probably looks like. But the interesting thing is, these images, like that, most of the images are just basically people making 3D renderings based on what they see with the shell and with the Joy-Con shells. And what we can see from the Joy-Con shells, what they show, there's definitely some similarities to the original Joy-Cons, but there's some differences as well. Most notably, the fact that it doesn't have the slide rail anymore. So this idea of the magnetic Joy-Cons that we'd previously heard about seems to definitely be the case. They've improved the SL and SR buttons on the inside of the controller. I mean, those look way better than the other ones, because the ones on the regular Joy-Cons are just like these little tiny things that are more or less concave. These ones look like they have a little more heft to them. I mean, they're bigger and less sunk into the Joy-Cons. Additionally, there's also there seems to be on the back of the shell a different kind of like button that you press in order to pull the Joy-Cons off. But instead of just being like this little black button, it's kind of like a button, something that you pull towards the outside of the Joy-Con in order to detach it. And then also of note is that the actual shells of the Joy-Cons from the images that we have here, there are the right Joy-Con now, well, I should say the layout in general is the same. It still has the split D-pad. Presumably you could just do these as two separate Joy-Cons, do multiplayer with single system. But then it also has, in addition to having the normal home button on the right-hand side, it also has a share button. At least it appears to be another share button. And then the left side is just the share button. We haven't seen the actual joysticks yet, other than, the mock-ups that people have made. But, everything we're seeing, at least based on the mock-ups, which I believe are probably pretty accurate, though I'm certainly hoping some things might be better. Seems like it's very, very similar to the original Switch, except, built more like the Switch OLED, minus the OLED screen most likely, except that it has two USB-C ports, one on top and one on the bottom, as well as the magnetic Joy-Cons and potentially IR sensors on both Joy-Cons this time around, and some slight differences in some of the buttons on top as well. But I think that's about it. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't have much reason to doubt the legitimacy of this. I mean, granted, could not be real, but I think that it seems real enough to me that I'm willing to believe this. Especially with like some stuff relating to what we've already heard, like the magnetic Joy-Cons rather than using the rail system, which even with the description presented, I still would like to see it actually work in person,
Right.
because my mind just still isn't completely grasping the idea of having a magnetic Joy-Con rather than the rail system. I mean, they probably have a way to make it work, but I don't know. It just doesn't seem all that secure to
Right.
me, and compared with the rail system. So I would definitely have to again see that in person to feel more comfortable with it. I am curious about I'm very curious about the additional like button on I think it was the right Joy-Con, just because there was one, the right one originally was just the home button, and the left one was like screen share or screen capture. So like the right Joy-Con had like an additional sort of like square button on it. So I am curious to know like what that one does. I mean, I mean offhand I can't think of anything that would make sense to have as an additional button. Maybe that's something we could see in a full like reveal where they say, hey, and here's the new feature that comes with our Joy-Cons and something like that. I mean, I doubt they would do something like this is just like a turbo mode, like put that one there. I doubt they would do something. Nintendo would do something like that. But I am curious to know about that. And even though this wasn't necessarily shown as far as with the shells, I really want to know. I mean, granted, they've done stuff, especially with like the change what we've seen with the SR and LR buttons on the Joy-Cons, which definitely would seem to be better. And maybe if actually that probably wouldn't work since that requires a rail system. I was gonna say maybe with like the Joy-Con wrist straps, like maybe with the sort of like the thing you slide on top of them, maybe that would also make pressing them a whole lot easier, because I definitely remember really wanting to actually use the Joy-Con the wrist strap, because they actually made holding or pressing the buttons easier, because they had the little bumps on them rather than having to like try to force your finger to click the buttons there. But I do hope that they improve their joysticks with the Switch 2. I mean, at the very least, please get us Hall sticks, Hall effect sticks, because
Yeah, right.
you shouldn't.
There's no way Nintendo's gonna do that.
I just wish they just do something. Like I feel like they should be able to do something a whole lot better than what they've done with the standard Joy-Con sticks. So definitely do something there. I mean, all in all, it definitely seems believable. I mean, it is pretty, for the most part, similar to the Switch, which hopefully it means especially with like the cartridge slot. Hopefully that means definitely confirms, or I mean nothing's confirmed yet, but hopefully it supports the fact that the Switch 2 will be backwards compatible. Like that would be great. And perhaps even it would support the fact that maybe we might even get a boosted performance for games that support it, so that would also be great as well. But yeah, that's pretty much where I stand with this.
Yeah, and something that I saw about the supposed specs are that it's going to be let's see if I can find the information here. Might just be back on that article. Okay, so the Switch 2 is supposed to include 12 gigs of RAM compared to the 4 gigs of the original Switch. Support for HDMI 2.1, meaning potentially higher frame rates. Obviously, just depending on the game itself. Some 2D games could probably do higher frame rates. And 256 gigs of internal storage compared to the 32 of the base Switch. So, yeah, and like I was looking again at the image of the SL and SR buttons, and it looks like the new ones are like 4 times the size, because the ones on the Joy-Cons here are just like these little tiny things, little teeny tiny things. But it looks like they're at least 3 times the size, potentially at least 3 times bigger. It definitely looks like it's going to be better from that standpoint. I forgot to mention also that the console itself is bigger. Is the shell for the screen and everything appears to be larger than the base Switch. I'm not sure if it's larger than the Switch OLED. It may or may not be. But either way, it should be bigger. I think this is definitely a real leak. especially because we saw something like this with the Switch Lite before that got revealed. They had leaked the back shell for the Switch Lite, and a lot of people like said, "Oh, this isn't real," but I was pretty sure looking at it is like, this looks like a real thing, and sure enough, it was. So, and that's not to toot my own horn. It's just like, I'm not the only person who was saying that, but I looked at it and I thought that it looked legitimate, and it turns out it was. So I think that this very well could be. Either way, I just want Nintendo to go ahead and reveal this, and I want them to say it's not going to have an OLED screen so that I can resist the temptation to buy one at launch, because I really can't afford it right now. I just can't. And I think someone was saying, I can't remember if this was just speculation or if it was an actual like supposed leak, that it's probably going to be $400 when it launches, which, I mean, I think realistically, if it's as much of an improvement over the original Switch, it makes sense. Having 3 times the RAM is certainly helpful. Obviously, it's going to have its own custom chip. Well, I would assume, based on the obvious investment that Nvidia has made in Nintendo and how well the Switch did, that Nvidia would be happy to make a custom chip specifically for the Switch instead of just throwing in their X1, the Tegra X1. So it's going to be interesting to see when this gets revealed. I'm hoping it's soon. I just want to see what's going on with this thing. Like, I'm super curious. And I mean, it could be that, like I was predicting before, it'll be in October just like the original Switch was. It could be later. I mean, who knows? I wonder how much time there was in between that Switch Lite leak and when the Switch Lite was actually announced, because I don't really remember. But I'm curious about that. Either way, we'll just have to wait and see what comes up. I don't know. But if they did do an OLED screen, I would probably have to make it happen. Even if I have to sell some stuff in order to buy it at launch, I would probably have to. I mean, at that point, I would probably just hand me down the original Switch to my oldest son or something, and then my wife could have the OLED one, and I could have the new OLED, the Switch 2 OLED. But right now, I'm not really expecting that, and I'm not really sure. Well, I guess there's a whole lot of different things that they could potentially announce whenever they announce this. I think that's what I'm curious about more than anything else, is seeing what kind of games they're going to announce, because I mean, for one, I can't imagine there's going to be anything they'll announce that I won't already be able to play on Steam Deck, and potentially still better. But I mean, it's really hard to say. Just have to wait and see. Okay, that's enough of that. Any other thoughts?
No, sir.